The laughter echoed across the decorated ballroom like a cruel spotlight. I stood frozen, clutching a wrinkled photograph in my trembling hand, while half the office watched Stephen Hale, the man who called himself my mentor, mock me in front of HR. "That's just perfect," Stephen boomed, glass of champagne sloshing dangerously in his hand. "Jessica Monroe, our resident saint, wasting her time on some troubled foster kid. No wonder she's too distracted for real work." The chuckles from around the room cut like glass. My chest burned, but I refused to cry. Not in front of him. Not in front of all of them. And then it happened. Ethan Walsh, the quiet senior manager who rarely looked up from his reports, noticed the torn photograph I had been trying to tuck back into my purse. His eyes went wide. The champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor, spraying droplets across his expensive shoes. The room fell silent. "Jessica." His voice cracked as if he had seen a ghost. His hand trembled as he pointed at the photograph. "Where did you get that?" "It's his," I whispered, clutching the picture tighter. "Evan's, my foster son. It's all he has of his mother." Ethan's face drained of color. He swallowed hard, eyes darting around the room before settling back on me. And then, in a voice barely louder than a breath, he said, "Oh my God, that's our CEO's ex-wife." The entire ballroom froze. Forks clinked against plates and fell. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Stephen's smug grin faltered. And in that suspended silence, for the first time in months, I realized the power in the room no longer belonged to him. It had shifted. To me. But to understand how I ended up standing in the middle of that corporate holiday party with the whole company staring at me, you'd have to go back 6 months earlier. Back to when I first opened my apartment door to a boy who had already been rejected more times than he could count. I had always been good at organization. It's what made me a successful project coordinator at Meridian Technologies for the past 7 years. My life ran on schedules, plans, and perfect execution. My downtown Chicago apartment was spotless, my career trajectory carefully mapped out. At 32, I wasn't exactly where I'd imagined I'd be, but I was getting there. Then came the call from my cousin Sarah, who worked for our social services. "Jessica, I have a boy, 14. He's been through 6 homes in the last 2 years. Nobody wants to keep him." "Sarah, I don't know the first thing about teenagers." I remembered the panic in my voice. "I work 60-hour weeks. I live alone. I've never even had a pet. He needs someone who won't give up on him. Just meet him, Jess. Please." When Evan arrived at my door 3 days later, I wasn't prepared for the hollowness in his eyes. Tall for 14, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and shoulders hunched forward as if he was trying to disappear. The caseworker smiled politely before leaving, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. People didn't usually last with Evan. He carried walls built from abandonment, and those walls didn't come down easy. He clutched a small backpack like it contained everything valuable in his universe. "Maybe it did. This is temporary," he said, his first words to me as he stepped into my apartment. "Don't bother setting up anything special." I showed him to the spare room I'd hastily transformed from my home office. Desk pushed against the wall, new bedding from Target, a lamp I hoped looked cool enough for a teenage boy. "Bathrooms across the hall. There's Wi-Fi. Passwords on the fridge," I said, anxiety making me over-explain. "Are you hungry?" He shook his head. "Well, I'll let you get settled." Later that night, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed with something in his hands. A photograph, torn, creased, faded. A woman holding a toddler. Her smile was soft but tired, her eyes holding the eye. Same shadow I'd noticed in Evan's. "Your mom?" I asked gently, pausing in the doorway. He nodded but said nothing, quickly sliding the photo under his pillow. I wanted to ask more, about his mother, about what happened, about why he was in the system. But the walls were up, and I knew better than to scale them on day 1. "Good night, Evan." Those first weeks were like living with a ghost. He went to school, came home, did homework, all with minimal interaction. He answered direct questions with 1 or 2 words. He ate dinner in silence. The only thing that seemed to matter to him was that photograph, which he carried everywhere, carefully hidden in his pocket. When I told my boss, Stephen Hale, about my decision to become a foster parent, his reaction was immediate and dismissive. "A foster kid? Jessica, you're up for senior coordinator this year. This isn't the time for charity projects." Stephen was 50, silver-haired, with the kind of booming confidence that filled boardrooms. He wore tailored suits and told stories of golf outings with executives. He claimed to mentor his team, But his version of mentorship involved public criticism disguised as feedback and taking credit for others' successes. "It's not a charity project," I had responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a commitment I've made." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a disappointing investment. "Well, don't let it affect your work. You know how competitive things are getting around here." I should have recognized the warning in his tone, the subtle threat. Instead, I nodded and promised my work wouldn't suffer. For a while, I managed the impossible balancing act. Mornings were a blur of rushed breakfasts, forgotten homework, and subway rides where Evan barely spoke. Days were filled with meetings, presentations, and endless emails. Evenings meant helping with schoolwork while checking my own deadlines. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change with Evan. The walls didn't come down, but small windows appeared. He started asking about dinner. He left his door open sometimes. Once, he even showed me a B+ on a math test. But as Evan began to unfold, my workplace began to collapse around me. "Jessica, you missed a critical typo in the quarterly report," Stephen announced during a team meeting 3 months after Evan moved in. "I apologize. I'll correct it immediately." "No need. I stayed late to fix it myself." He smiled at the room. "I understand some of us have personal distractions." The comment hung in the air. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably. That was only the beginning. Mom, look!" The little boy in the photograph tugged at his mother's hand, pointing at something just out of frame. The woman's smile was weary but genuine, her arm protectively around her son's shoulders. The background looked like a park, trees blurred, sunlight catching in her hair. I stared at the photo I'd found on the bathroom counter. Evan must have forgotten it after his shower. This was the first time I'd seen it up close. The woman couldn't have been much older than I was now, early 30s maybe. Pretty in an understated way, with Evan's same dark hair and intense eyes. The photo was torn along the right edge, as if someone had been standing beside them, but had been deliberately removed from the memory. I carefully placed it on Evan's bed, but curiosity and concern lingered. 5 months into our arrangement, and this photograph remained Evan's most treasured possession, yet I knew nothing about the woman in it or what had happened to her. That night over dinner, spaghetti, the one meal Evan had admitted to liking, I tried again. "I accidentally saw your photo today. You left it in the bathroom." His fork paused midway to his mouth. "Did you touch it?" "I put it on your bed. I'm sorry if that upset you." He relaxed slightly. "It's fine. She looks like you," I ventured. "Your mother." Evan twirled pasta around his fork, saying, "Nothing. Do you remember much about her?" His shoulders tensed. "Some." "What happened to her, Evan, if you don't mind me asking?" The fork clattered against the plate. "She got sick, cancer, when I was 10. The words came out clipped, rehearsed. "She didn't have family. Dad wasn't around. I went into the system. 4 years in foster care. 4 years of being passed from home to home. My heart ached for him." "The picture is torn," I said softly. "Yeah. Was someone else?" "I don't want to talk about it." He stood abruptly. "Can I be excused?" I nodded, and he disappeared into his room, closing the door firmly behind him. Progress with Evan came in microscopic steps forward, followed by giant leaps back. But those small steps, they meant everything. The morning he asked if I needed help with the dishes. The afternoon he voluntarily showed me his history project. The evening we actually laughed together while watching some ridiculous reality show. But as home life improved by inches, work became increasingly unbearable. Stephen Hale had made it his personal mission to highlight every minor mistake, every late arrival, every moment my mind drifted to Evan during a meeting. "Jessica seems preoccupied again," he would announce to the room. "Should we pause so she can check on her little project?" Or, "Jessica's late, probably another foster kid crisis. Let's just start without her." Each comment was delivered with a smile, as if he was making a harmless joke. Each one cut deeper than the last. Ethan Walsh, the senior manager who rarely spoke to anyone, caught me crying in the break room one afternoon. "He's an ass," Ethan said simply, handing me a tissue. I wiped my eyes quickly. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. Steven's targeting you and everyone knows it." Ethan was 36, conventionally handsome in a way that disappeared in a crowd. He wore neatly pressed shirts and kept to himself. Rumor had it he'd been with the company for over a decade, steadily climbing the ranks without making waves. "Why does he hate me so much?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. Ethan leaned against the counter. "Steven doesn't hate you. He's threatened by you. You're good at your job, people respect you, and you have a life outside this place. He can't stand that. I almost laughed. A life? I barely sleep. You took in a kid who needed help. That's more humanity than most people show in a lifetime. Ethan's eyes were surprisingly kind. How's that going, by the way? It's complicated. Good days and bad. Kids usually are. Something flickered across his face, a shadow I couldn't interpret. Before I could respond, Stephen appeared in the doorway. Ethan, I need those Q3 projections. Jessica, if you're done with your little breakdown, there's actual work waiting. Ethan straightened immediately. I'll have those to you within the hour, Stephen. As Stephen walked away, Ethan gave me an apologetic look. Just hang in there. Nothing stays the same forever. Those words would prove more prophetic than either of us could have imagined. The annual holiday party at Meridian Technologies was legendary. Open bar, gourmet food, extravagant decorations, alls, held in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. Attendance wasn't technically mandatory, but everyone knew it might as well be. I can stay home alone, Evan insisted when I told him about the party. I'm 14, not 4. I know you're capable, I said, but legally I can't leave you alone overnight. The party was notorious for running late, with many employees staying at the hotel, rather than risking the drive home. Then I'll come with you and sit in the hotel room. I hesitated. Actually, there's a teen lounge with video games and movies, for employees' kids. You could hang out there while I make an appearance at the party. The skepticism on his face was clear. Sounds lame. Probably. But there's unlimited pizza. That earned me the ghost of a smile. The night of the party, Evan was surprisingly cooperative. He even wore the new button-down shirt I'd bought him without complaint. As we rode the elevator up to the hotel's mezzanine level, I noticed him patting his pocket, checking for the photograph, his eternal talisman. You'll be okay? I asked as I dropped him off at the teen lounge. He rolled his eyes. I'll survive. I'll check on you in an hour. The wee bed. Ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal decorations catching light, white flowers cascading from the ceiling, ice sculptures on every table. Executives mingled with department heads, drinks flowing freely. I spotted Stephen holding court near the bar, his laugh carrying across the room. I grabbed a glass of wine and tried to blend into the background. You clean up nice, came Ethan's voice from beside me. He wore a well-fitted charcoal suit, his usually serious face softened by the dim lighting. Thanks. You too. Did you bring your foster son? He's in the teen lounge, probably destroying everyone at Mario Kart. Ethan smiled. Smart kid. This party's overrated anyway. For the next hour, Ethan and I actually had a pleasant conversation about books, Chicago winters, the best pizza places in the city. It was the longest interaction we'd ever had, and I found myself relaxing for the first time in months. Then Stephen spotted us. Jessica! Stephen's voice boomed across the conversation circle we'd joined. There's our resident social worker! Several colleagues laughed nervously. Stephen approached, glass in hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. How's the charity case doing these days? He asked loudly enough for nearby groups to hear. Evan is fine, thank you, I replied, keeping my voice measured. Evan, he repeated, as if tasting the name. Such a commitment, taking in a teenager. I'm surprised you can keep up with your actual responsibilities. An awkward silence fell over our group. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. Jessica manages her responsibilities exceptionally well, Ethan said quietly. Her team has the highest productivity metrics this quarter. Stephen's eyes narrowed at the unexpected defense. Well, Ethan, not everyone has your perspective on what constitutes exceptional. He turned back to me. Tell me, Jessica, what made you decide to play mother? Biological clock ticking? Or just needed something to talk about at parties? The cruelty in his tone was unmistakable. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Linda from HR had joined a nearby conversation circle. She was listening but made no move to intervene. I made a choice to help someone who needed it, I answered, my fingers tightening around my wine glass. It's not that complicated. Noble, Stephen mocked. But we all know there's no room for distraction in this business. The Williams account, wasn't that yours? Heard they weren't impressed with the last presentation. My stomach dropped. The Williams account was one of our biggest clients. I'd worked overtime for weeks on that presentation, even while helping Evan study for midterms. The Williams team specifically commended my work, I corrected him, feeling suddenly bold. You can check their feedback report. That's just perfect. Stephen boomed, glass of champagne sloshing in his hand. Jessica Monroe, our resident saint, wasting her time on some troubled foster kid. No wonder she's too distracted for real work. Several people laughed, some genuinely, others from nervousness or fear. My purse slipped from my shoulder as I stepped back, and I fumbled to catch it. Evan's photo, which he'd asked me to keep safe while he was in the teen lounge, fell out onto the floor between us. I bent quickly to retrieve it, but not before Steven saw. "What's this? The problem child?" He reached for it, but I snatched it up first. "Don't," I warned, surprising myself with my firmness. "Let's see the troubled teen who's derailing your career," he persisted, hand extended. "Steven, that's enough," Ethan interjected. Something in Ethan's tone made Steven pause. The room seemed to shift, attention focusing on our little drama. I clutched the photo tightly, trying to tuck it back into my purse with trembling hands. That's when Ethan noticed it, really saw what I was holding. His expression changed instantly, eyes widening in shock. The champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering, on the marble floor. "Jessica!" His voice cracked. "Where did you get that?" "It's his," I explained, confused by his reaction. "Evan's, my foster son. It's all he has of his mother." Ethan's face drained of color. He swallowed hard, eyes darting around the room before settling back on me. "Oh my God, that's our CEO's ex-wife." The ballroom fell silent. Even Steven stood frozen, his smug expression evaporating. "What?" I whispered, looking down at the torn photograph in disbelief. "Catherine Harrington," Ethan said, his voice low but carrying in the silence. "She was married to James Harrington before he founded Meridian. They divorced about 12 years ago." He swallowed hard. "She disappeared from public view shortly after. No one here talks about it. James Harrington, the reclusive founder and CEO of Meridian Technologies. The man whose name was on our building but who rarely made appearances, preferring to run the company from behind closed doors." Steven's face had turned ashen. "Don't be ridiculous," he sputtered. "That could be anyone." "It's Catherine," Ethan insisted. "I've been here since the beginning. I knew her." I looked around the room at the shocked faces, at Linda from HR quickly whispering into her phone, at Steven's crumbling confidence. I need to check on Evan," I managed, backing away from the circle. "Jessica, wait," Ethan called, following me as I headed for the exit. In the hallway, away from the stunned silence of the ballroom, I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. "Are you sure?" I asked, when Ethan caught up. "About the woman in the photo?" "Positive. Catherine was distinctive. Those eyes. I'd recognize her anywhere." He ran a hand through his hair. "Does Evan know? About James being his father?" "I don't think so. He barely talks about his past. He said his father wasn't around." Ethan's expression darkened. "That's one way of putting it. What happened between them, James, and Catherine? It wasn't pretty. James was obsessed with building Meridian, working insane hours. Catherine wanted a normal life, especially after they had a child." Ethan hesitated. "The divorce was ugly. James buried himself in the company afterward. He rarely mentions his previous life." I glanced toward the teen lounge, feeling suddenly protective. "Evan doesn't need this drama. He's been through enough." "Jessica, you don't understand. James never knew where they went. There were rumors Catherine took their son out of state, changed their names." Ethan's eyes were intense. "He hired private investigators, but they never found them. If Evan is who I think he is—" "Jessica Monroe?" A woman's crisp voice interrupted us. I turned to see a slender, professional-looking woman I didn't recognize. "Linda Harper asked me to find you. Mr. Harrington would like to see you in his suite. Immediately." My heart pounded. "I need to check on Evan first." "We've sent someone to stay with him," she replied. "Mr. Harrington was very specific. He wants to see you alone." I looked at Ethan, panic rising. "It's okay," he said softly. "Go. I'll make sure Evan's all right." The elevator ride to the penthouse suite felt endless. My mind raced with questions. What would James Harrington say? What did this mean for Evan? For me? The doors opened directly into a luxurious suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's glittering skyline. A tall man stood with his back to me, gazing out at the view, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Mr. Harrington?" I said, my voice smaller than I intended. He turned slowly. James Harrington was in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same intense eyes I saw every day in Evan's face. The resemblance was unmistakable. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I believe you have a photograph I'd very much like to see. My hands trembled as I retrieved Evan's photograph from my purse. This worn, creased image had become the epicenter of an earthquake I never saw coming. May I? James Harrington asked, extending his hand. I hesitated. It's Evan's most precious possession. I promised to keep it safe. Something shifted in Harrington's expression, a softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible tremble of his outstretched fingers. I understand, he said, withdrawing his hand. Perhaps you could show me? I held up the photograph so he could see it clearly. The woman, Catherine, smiling tiredly at the camera, her arm around a small, dark-haired boy pointing excitedly at something out of frame. Harrington's composure cracked. He made a small, involuntary sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and turned away, setting his glass down with deliberate care. When was the last time you saw them? I asked after a long moment. He remained facing the window, his silhouette stark against the city lights. 12 years ago. Evan was just 2. His voice had roughened. Catherine filed for divorce, took him, and disappeared. I hired investigators, spent millions trying to find them. After 3 years, I had to accept they didn't want to be found. She died, I said softly. 4 years ago. Cancer. His shoulders stiffened. And Evan? He's been in foster care since then? Yes. He's 14 now. He's been through 6 homes in the last 4 years before coming to me. Harrington turned back, his face a complex map of grief and shock. 6 homes? The words seemed to physically pain him. My son has been in 6 different foster homes? He's had a difficult time, I acknowledged. He doesn't trust easily. Of course he doesn't. Harrington's jaw tightened. Does he know about me? He says his father wasn't around. That's all he's told me. Catherine must have... He shook his head. I need to see him. Alarm bells rang in my mind. Mr. Harrington. Evan is finally starting to stabilize. Finding out his father is alive, that you're who you are. It would be a tremendous shock. He's my son. The words held both authority and desperation. And he's a 14-year-old boy who's lost everything and everyone he's ever counted on. I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. He needs careful handling. Harrington studied me with new interest. You care about him. I do. Yet you've only known him for 6 months, I supplied. But I've seen him struggle. I've watched him try to build walls to protect himself from more pain. I won't let anyone hurt him again, even his father. A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, snow had begun to fall, tiny flakes catching the light as they drifted past the windows. You're right, Harrington finally conceded, his voice quieter. We need to approach this carefully. He gestured to a seating area. Please sit. Tell me about my son. For the next hour, I described Evan, his struggles in school and recent improvements, his quiet intelligence, his dry sense of humor that emerged in rare moments, his nightmares, his resilience. Harrington listened intently, asking occasional questions, his eyes never leaving my face. He sounds like Catherine, he said at one point, a sad smile briefly appearing. She was quiet but stubborn, saw straight through people's bullshit, excuse my language. He does have that quality, I agreed. Very perceptive. Miss Monroe. Jessica, please. Jessica. He nodded. What happened tonight? How did my staff learn about the photograph? I explained the holiday party confrontation, Stephen's public humiliation campaign, and Ethan's recognition of Catherine in the photo. Harrington's expression darkened considerably. Stephen Hale, he's been mocking you for caring for a foster child? Among other things, I admitted. It's been challenging. I see. His tone had turned cold and precise. And this has been ongoing? For months now. Harrington stood abruptly, straightening his already impeccable suit jacket. I think it's time I made an appearance at my own party, don't you? My stomach dropped. Mr. Harrington, I didn't tell you this to cause trouble. James, he corrected. And you've caused no trouble, Jessica. You've simply illuminated where it already existed. He extended his hand to help me up. Shall we? The elevator ride back down was tense with unspoken possibilities. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what would happen next. One moment, James said as the doors opened to the mezzanine level. I'd like to see Evan first. Just see him, not speak to him yet, if that's acceptable. I nodded, leading him toward the teen lounge. We paused at the doorway. Inside, several teenagers lounged on oversized beanbags, playing video games, or scrolling through phones. Evan sat slightly apart, focused intently on a game controller, his dark hair falling across his forehead just as it had the day he arrived at my apartment. James stared at his son, emotion playing openly across his usually controlled features. "He looks so much like her," he whispered. "He does," I agreed softly. After a long moment, James straightened his shoulders. "Thank you." He turned toward the ballroom, resolve hardening his features. "Now, I believe I have some company business to attend to." The holiday party was still in full swing, though the atmosphere had shifted to something tense and expectant. Conversations hushed as we entered. Eyes widened at the sight of the reclusive CEO making an unexpected appearance. Stephen stood near the bar, deep in conversation with Linda from HR, his expression worried. When he saw James, he plastered on a broad smile and stepped forward. "James, what a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting—" "Mr. Hale," James cut him off, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I understand you've been creating a hostile work environment for one of our most valuable team members." Stephen's smile faltered. "I don't know what you've heard, but I assure you—" "I've heard enough," James interrupted. "In fact, I've seen enough tonight to make several things very clear." He turned to address the room at large. Meridian Technologies was founded on principles of innovation, excellence, and most importantly, integrity. When I step back from daily operations, I expect those values to be upheld. The room was statue still, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. Jessica Monroe has demonstrated exceptional commitment not only to this company, but to the kind of human compassion that should be celebrated, not ridiculed. James's gaze swept the room, landing finally on Stephen. "Mr. Hale, I'd like to see you in my office first thing Monday morning." Stephen's face drained of color. "Of course, James, I'd be happy to. That will be all for now." James cut him off again, turning away dismissively. "The—" whispers began immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. James ignored them, guiding me gently away from the stunned onlookers. "I apologize for the spectacle," he said quietly, "but some messages require a public delivery." "Thank you," I managed, still processing what had just happened. "No," he replied, his eyes suddenly vulnerable again. "Thank you, Jessica, for taking care of my son when I couldn't." The weekend after the holiday party was the longest of my life. Evan and I returned to my apartment in near silence, the weight of unspoken revelations hanging between us. I had told him nothing yet, only that I'd been called away to deal with a work situation, which wasn't entirely untrue. James Harrington and I had agreed to meet Monday afternoon to discuss how to approach Evan with the truth. In the meantime, I carried the knowledge like a live grenade, unsure when or how to release it. "You're being weird," Evan commented Sunday morning as I hovered near him while he ate cereal. "Am I?" I tried to sound casual. "Yeah, you keep staring at me." He pushed his dark hair from his eyes that now unmistakably mirrored James Harrington's. How had I not seen it before? "Sorry, just thinking about stuff." "Work stuff?" He sounded skeptical. "Sort of." Evan studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Whatever." I watched him eat. This boy who had been abandoned by circumstance, who had weathered more loss than most adults. In 6 months, he had become a central part of my life, my responsibility, my concern, my family. The realization tightened my chest. What would happen when James stepped back into his role as father? Where would that leave me? Monday morning arrived with biting December wind and gray skies. I dropped Evan at school with a hug that lingered too long. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, pulling away with teenage embarrassment. "Nothing. Have a good day." "You too." He hesitated. "That guy who was bothering you at work, is he still causing trouble?" The question surprised me. Evan rarely asked about my problems. "We'll see," I answered honestly. "Things might be changing." He nodded, seeming satisfied, then jogged up the school steps without looking back. The office atmosphere was electric when I arrived. Whispers followed me down hallways. Colleagues who had previously ignored me now smiled warmly or stopped to chat. Stephen Hale was nowhere to be seen. "Jessica?" Ethan appeared at my cubicle mid-morning. "You okay?" "I think so. It's all a bit surreal." He lowered his voice. "Stephen's been in with HR all morning. The rumor is he's being transferred to our Minneapolis office. Minneapolis in December." I couldn't help but smile slightly. Karma has a sense of humor. "Did you speak with Harrington? About Evan?" "Yes. We're meeting this afternoon to discuss next steps." Ethan's eyes held genuine concern. "How do you feel about all this?" "Honestly? Terrified." Evan's finally starting to trust me, to feel secure. This could upend everything. Or give him something he's been missing his whole life, Ethan suggested gently. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Both possibilities felt equally weighted with hope and fear. At precisely 2 o'clock, Linda from HR appeared at my desk. Mr. Harrington is ready for you now. James Harrington's office occupied the entire top floor of Meridian Tower, a vast space with panoramic views of Lake Michigan. Unlike the sterile corporate decor of the lower floors, his office held warm leather furniture, bookshelves filled with actual books, and large abstract paintings in vibrant colors. James rose from behind his desk as I entered. He looked different today, still impeccably dressed, but with shadows under his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. Jessica, thank you for coming. He gestured to a seating area near the windows. Coffee? Please. As his assistant brought coffee and then discreetly withdrew, James settled across from me. I've been thinking about Evan nonstop, about what to tell him, how to approach this. So have I. What has he told you about his early life? About me? I considered carefully. Very little. Just that his mother got sick when he was 10, that his father wasn't around, and that he went into foster care after she died. Not around, James repeated, pain flashing across his features. That's an interesting way to describe a father who spent 3 years and millions of dollars trying to find his son. I don't think Evan knows that part of the story. No, I don't imagine he does. James set down his coffee cup with careful precision. Catherine and our marriage was complicated. I was building Meridian, working insane hours. She wanted a normal family life. His expression darkened. The arguments escalated. I said things I regret. She threatened to leave, take Evan where I'd never find them. And she did, I said softly. Yes. One day I came home, and they were simply gone. No note, no forwarding address. She filed divorce papers through an attorney, refused to provide her location. The court granted her full custody given my demonstrated prioritization of business over family. Bitterness edged his voice. You didn't fight it? Of course I fought it. For years. But Catherine was determined. She changed their names, moved constantly. The investigators would get close only to discover they'd moved again. He looked out at the lake. After 3 years, my lawyers advised me to stop. Said I was becoming obsessed, that it was affecting my health, the company. So you gave up. His eyes snapped back to me, sharp with anger. I never gave up. I set up trust funds, college accounts, all waiting for Evan. I kept investigators on retainer. I checked databases yearly for any sign of them. His voice broke slightly. I never stopped looking. I just stopped expecting to find them. The pain in his voice was undeniable. Whatever had happened between James and Catherine, his grief for his lost son was genuine. James, what do you want now? With Evan? Everything, he answered immediately. To know him, to be his father, to give him the life he should have had. And what about his current life? School, friends, our arrangement? I held my breath, dreading the answer. James studied me thoughtfully. Jessica, I'm not planning to sweep in and uproot him. Again, he's been through enough transitions, but I do want a relationship with my son. Relief flooded through me. So what's our approach? I think we need to be completely honest, but gentle. James leaned forward. Tell him who I am, that I've been searching for him, that I want to be part of his life again, but that nothing needs to change immediately unless he wants it to. And if he doesn't. Want a relationship with you? I asked the question that clearly terrified us both. Then I wait, James said simply, for as long as it takes. We spent the next hour crafting a careful plan. We would tell Evan together that evening, at my apartment where he felt safe. We would answer his questions honestly, but without overwhelming him. We would emphasize that he had choices, that his feelings mattered. There's one more thing, James said as our meeting concluded. I've been thinking about your position here at Meridian. My stomach tightened. Was I about to be moved aside now that I'd served my purpose in reconnecting father and son? You've demonstrated extraordinary compassion and strength of character, he continued. Not just with Evan, but in how you've handled Stevens. Harassment. I'd like to offer you a new position. Director of Employee Welfare and Development. Director? I echoed, stunned. A new department focused on creating a supportive work environment, mentoring programs, and community outreach initiatives. He smiled slightly. With a significant salary increase, of course. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. But know that this offer stands regardless of what happens with Evan. You've earned it on your own merits. As I left his office, my mind spun with possibilities. A director position, a relationship with Evan that might continue even if he reconnected with his father. It felt too good to be true, and experience had taught me that such feelings were usually warranted. Ethan was waiting near the elevators, anxiety clear on his face. How did it go? We're telling Evan tonight, together. And Harrington? How was he? Surprisingly, human. I pressed the elevator button. He offered me a director position. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? That's fantastic, Jessica. Is it? Or is he just trying to keep me close because of Evan? Does it matter? Ethan asked pragmatically. It's a huge opportunity either way. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. What about Steven? I asked as we stepped inside. Gone. Effective immediately. HR's calling it a lateral move to expand our regional presence. I couldn't help the small smile that formed. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Ethan laughed, the sound warming something inside me. By the way, he said as the elevator descended, I've been meaning to ask, would you like to grab dinner sometime? When all this settles down, of course. The question caught me off guard. Like, a date? He nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. Unless that's completely inappropriate, which it might be, given everything. I'd like that. I interrupted his nervous backtracking. When things settle down. His smile was worth all the chaos of the past few days. My apartment had never felt smaller than it did that evening, with James Harrington perched awkwardly on my IKEA sofa. He had arrived 15 minutes early, bringing a small duffel bag that he placed carefully on the coffee table. What's in the bag? I asked, setting out the tea I'd prepared. Some things I thought Evan might want to see. Photos mostly. His baby book. James's fingers. Tapped nervously against his knee. Do you think this is the right approach? Perhaps we should have arranged neutral territory. This is where Evan feels safe, I reassured him, though my own stomach churned with anxiety. It's the right place. James nodded, glancing around the modest living room with its mismatched furniture and framed museum posters. A far cry from his penthouse suite or executive office. If he judged the surroundings, he kept it to himself. Tell me about his daily routine, he requested. What does he like for breakfast? What subjects does he enjoy in school? Does he play sports? The eager questions reminded me that beneath the powerful CEO exterior was simply a father who had missed 12 years of his son's life. I answered as best I could, filling the minutes until my phone chimed with a text. He's on his way up, I said, reading the message. James, remember? Let him set the pace. Answer honestly, but without pressure. I remember. The lock turned, and we both stiffened. Evan pushed through the door, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair windblown from the December gusts. Hey, he called, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. Can we order pizza tonight? The cafeteria lunch was... He froze mid-sentence as he registered James's presence. His eyes darted from the strange man to me, instantly wary. Evan, I said, keeping my voice steady, this is someone I'd like you to meet. Can you come sit with us for a few minutes? Suspicion clouded his features, but he moved cautiously to the armchair farthest from James, dropping his backpack at his feet. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Evan, this is James Harrington. He's the CEO of Meridian Technologies, where I work. Evan's eyes narrowed. Is this about that guy who was bullying you? Did you get fired? No, nothing like that, I assured him quickly. James is here for a different reason. I glanced at James, who sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Evan with barely contained emotion. Evan, James began, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. I believe I'm your father. The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. Evan's face went blank, a defensive mechanism I'd seen before when he was processing something painful. My father's dead, he said flatly. Is that what your mother told you? James asked quietly. She didn't have to tell me. Anything. He wasn't there. Ever. The bitterness in Evan's voice cut through the room. He didn't care enough to stick around. That's not true. James leaned forward, his composure cracking. Evan, I never stopped looking for you. Your mother took you when you were 2. She changed your names, moved constantly. I hired investigators, spent years trying to find you both. Evan looked to me, confusion and anger warring in his expression. You knew about this? You set this up? I just found out at the holiday party, I explained. Remember the photograph of your mother? The one you asked me to keep safe for you that night? His hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the photo usually resided. Someone at work recognized her. I continued carefully. That's how we discovered the connection. Let me show you something, James said, reaching for the duffel bag. He pulled out a leather-bound album and opened it to a marked page. This is your mother and me on our wedding day. Evan refused to look at first, but curiosity eventually won out. He glanced at the photograph. Catherine in a simple white dress, her smile radiant, standing beside a younger James Harrington. The resemblance between father and son was unmistakable from this angle. This was our house in Lake Forest, James continued, turning pages. And here you are, the day we brought you home from the hospital. Evan's resistance visibly weakened as he stared at images of himself as an infant, then a toddler, happy moments from a life he couldn't remember. If you cared so much, why did she leave? He finally asked, voice tight with emotion. Why did she take me away? James closed the album slowly. Because I was a workaholic who put the company before our family. Because we argued constantly. Because I said things in anger that I've regretted every day since. He met Evan's gaze directly. Your mother had every reason to be angry with me, but taking you away completely, never letting me see. That was wrong too. She said you didn't want us anymore. Evan's voice was barely audible. That you had a new family. Never. James's voice broke on the word. There was never anyone else. Nothing more important than finding you. The silence that followed was heavy with years of absence, with stories untold and truths distorted. Why tell me now? Evan finally asked. What do you want from me? I want to know you, James answered simply. I've missed 12 years of your life. I can never get those back. But I'd like to be part of your future, if you'll let me. Evan looked to me again, seeking reassurance or guidance. Does this mean I have to go live with him? My heart contracted at the fear in his voice. No, I said firmly. Nothing has to change right away. You'll stay here with me for as long as you want to. I glanced at James, who nodded in confirmation. Evan, James said, I know this is overwhelming. I'm not expecting you to welcome me with open arms after all this time. I just want a chance to be in your life again, whatever that looks like. Evan stared at the album on the coffee table, his expression unreadable. Can I think about it? Of course, James and I answered simultaneously. I need some time alone. Evan stood abruptly, grabbed his backpack, and headed toward his room. Evan, James called, his voice strained. The photo you carry, of you and your mother, it's torn because I was in it originally. She cut me out. Evan paused, not turning around. I figured that much out, he said softly, then continued to his room, closing the door firmly behind him. James stared at the closed door, naked longing on his face. That went about as well as could be expected, he said finally. He needs time, I agreed. This is a lot to process. He has your steadiness, James observed, your ability to contain emotion. He's had a lot of practice, I said sadly. Too much practice. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in our own thoughts. Thank you, James said suddenly, for creating a home where he feels safe, for being someone he trusts enough to turn to when he's afraid. The sincere gratitude caught me off guard. He's a good kid, I said. He deserves stability. Yes, he does. James gathered the album and placed it back in the duffel bag. I'll leave this here, in case he wants to look at it later. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. May I call tomorrow to see how he's doing? Of course. At the door, James paused. Jessica, whatever happens next, I want you to know that I consider you part of Evan's life now. That won't change, regardless of how our arrangement evolves. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, listening for any sound from Evan's room. When none came, I approached his door and knocked gently. Evan, do you want to talk? Silence then. Not yet. Okay, I'll be here when you're ready. Jessica? His voice was muffled through the door. Yes? You're not going anywhere, right? Even if he wants me to live with him eventually? The vulnerability in the question broke my heart. I'm not going anywhere, Evan, I promise. 3 weeks passed in a delicate dance of new boundaries and cautious connections. Evan agreed to weekly dinners with James, always with me present at first, in the neutral territory of restaurants where they could talk without the pressure of either home space looming over them. I watched their interactions closely. Evan guarded but gradually curious, James eager yet restraining himself from pushing too hard. They were so alike in their mannerisms, in the way they tilted their heads when considering a question, in how they both deflected emotional moments with dry humor. He asked about my classes today, Evan told me after their third dinner as we walked home through light January snow. About what I'm good at. And what did you tell him? That I like math and science. That I'm thinking about robotics club next semester. He kicked at a snowdrift. He said he'd help me build something if I wanted. He used to be an engineer before he started the company. That could be fun, I offered, careful to keep my tone neutral. Maybe. Evan was quiet for several steps. He's different than I expected. In what way? I always pictured my dad as this selfish jerk who didn't care, but he listens when I talk, and he doesn't make a big deal when I don't want to answer his questions. Evan shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. He's trying. Yes, he is. At the office, changes moved more swiftly. Stephen Hale had indeed been transferred to Minneapolis. I was officially appointed Director of Employee Welfare and Development, with a team of 5 reporting to me and a spacious corner office just 2 floors below James's executive suite. It suits you, Ethan said, leaning against my office doorway one afternoon. The office or the job? I asked, smiling. Both. He stepped inside, closing the door partially. So, about that dinner we discussed. Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Walsh? I teased, enjoying the way his confidence faltered slightly. I believe I already did, Ms. Monroe. I'm simply following up on your affirmative response. We settled on Friday evening. Evan would be having his first solo dinner with James at his Lake Forest estate, a significant step that both excited and terrified me. Are you sure you're ready for this? I asked Evan as he packed an overnight bag. James had suggested Evan stay in what would have been his childhood bedroom, now redecorated to suit a teenager. It's just one night, Evan shrugged, but I could see the nervousness in his movements. Besides, you deserve a break from me. That's not how this works, I said gently. I don't need breaks from you. Evan zipped his bag closed, then turned to face me. Can I ask you something? Anything. If I decide I want to live with him someday, would that hurt your feelings? The question landed like a stone in my chest, but I kept my expression calm. No, Evan. I want what's best for you. If rebuilding a relationship with your father brings you happiness, that could never hurt me. He studied me with those perceptive eyes, so like his father's. But we'd still see each other, right? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I promised, blinking back unexpected tears. Whatever happens, we're family now. Something in his posture relaxed. Good, he said simply. Then, after a hesitation, is Ethan your boyfriend now? I laughed, grateful for the shift in topic. We're having dinner. One dinner. He likes you, Evan stated with teenage certainty. And you smile more when he's around? Is that your expert opinion? Just facts, he said, hoisting his bag. You should wear that blue dress, the one with the swirly pattern. Since when do you notice my clothes? Since James told me gentlemen pay attention to details. He rolled his eyes, but there was a hint of pride in his voice. James arrived precisely on time, looking less like a CEO in casual slacks and a sweater. He greeted me warmly, but his attention was primarily on Evan. Ready for the grand tour? I've got the game room set up with all the latest consoles. Evan feigned indifference, but I caught the excited gleam in his eyes. Whatever, as long as you have food. Enough to feed an army, James assured him. To me, he added, I'll have him call before bedtime, and I'll bring him back tomorrow afternoon unless you'd prefer. Tomorrow afternoon is perfect, I interrupted. You two enjoy your time together. After they left, I stood in my suddenly quiet apartment, emotions swirling. Pride in Evan's willingness to try, happiness that he might reclaim his relationship with his father, but also a hollowness I hadn't anticipated, a preview of what life might feel like if Evan eventually chose to live with James permanently. My phone chimed with a text from Ethan. Looking how? Forward to tonight. Should I bring wine or flowers? Or both? Too much? Not enough? I smiled, typing back. Just bring yourself, and maybe dessert. Dinner with Ethan was surprisingly easy. We talked about books, films, childhood memories, carefully navigating around work topics. He told me about growing up in Boston, about his dream of writing a novel someday, about his sister who taught elementary school in Seattle. I've been at Meridian since the beginning, he explained over tiramisu. I was one of James's first hires straight out of business school. So you knew Catherine and Evan as a baby? Not well, he admitted. James kept his family life mostly separate, but Catherine would bring baby Evan to the office occasionally. She was vibrant, always laughing, bringing homemade cookies for the staff. She made that massive corporation feel human. What happened between them? I asked, the question that had lingered for weeks. Ethan sighed. The company took over. James worked 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, holidays. Catherine begged him to cut back. They fought constantly. He swirled his wine thoughtfully. The last big argument. It was at a company event. Actually, very public. She told him he had to choose, his family or his empire. He said something like, "Don't be dramatic, the company is for our family." 2 days later, she was gone. He told me he looked for them for years. He did. It nearly destroyed him. That's why he became so reclusive. Ethan reached across the table, gently taking my hand. "You're fostering Evan. It's like you closed a circuit that's been open for 12 years. I'm just trying to do what's right for him. And that's why you're extraordinary," he said softly. Later at my door, Ethan hesitated. "I'd like to kiss you, but I don't want to complicate things further." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. "I think things are already pretty complicated. One more complication won't hurt." His kiss was gentle, undemanding, and over too soon. "Good night, Jessica," he whispered. "Good night." Around 11, my phone rang. Evan checking in as promised. "The house is huge," he reported, voice tinged with awe. "I have my own bathroom, and there's a theater room with actual theater seats." "Having fun?" I asked, smiling at his excitement. "It's okay," he downplayed, then added, "We made pasta together. He's actually pretty good at cooking." "That's great, Evan. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." A pause, then, "How was your date?" "Who said it was a date?" "Was it?" I laughed. "Yes, it was a date. A good one." "Cool." Another pause. "I miss you, though." My heart squeezed. "I miss you, too. Get some sleep, okay?" "Okay. Night, Jessica." "Good night, Evan." As winter melted into spring, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Evan spent weekends with James, weekdays with me. He joined the robotics club, where James occasionally volunteered as a mentor. His grades improved, his nightmares decreased, and slowly, the walls he'd built began to come down. Ethan and I continued dating, taking things slowly, mindful of the complicated dynamics of our situation. He was patient, understanding when Evan needed my attention, or when work demands pulled me away. One warm evening in April, I arrived home to find both James and Evan sitting on my sofa, an unusual deviation from our carefully structured arrangement. "What's going on?" I asked, setting down my bags. They exchanged looks, a silent communication I'd noticed developing between them. "Jessica," James began, "Evan and I have been talking about the future." My stomach tightened. "Oh?" "I've asked Evan if he'd like to move in with me permanently." The words I'd been both expecting and dreading. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart pounded. "I see. And what do you think about that, Evan?" Evan took a deep breath. I told him I would, on one condition. "What condition?" "That you come too." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" James smiled, an expression I'd seen more frequently in recent months. "Evan refuses to leave you behind. And honestly, so do I." "I don't understand." "James has this massive house," Evan explained, leaning forward eagerly. "Like, ridiculously big for 2 people. There's a guest wing that's basically its own apartment, with a separate entrance and everything." "You want me to live in your guest wing?" I clarified, looking at James in confusion. "I want us to stop pretending we're not already a family," James said simply. "Evan needs both of us. And the arrangement we have now, it's working. But it could be better, more seamless." "I'd maintain my independence," I said slowly, trying to process the offer. "Completely," James assured me. "Your own space, your own life. Ethan would be welcome anytime, of course. But Evan wouldn't have to choose between homes anymore." I looked at Evan, whose expression held a vulnerability I hadn't seen in months. "Is this what you want?" "I want us all together," he said quietly. "You're the one who saved me, Jessica. I'm not leaving you behind." 1 year after the holiday party that changed everything, we held a different kind of gathering. The Lake Forest estate, now truly a home rather than a showplace, was filled with laughter and music. The occasion? Evan's 15th birthday. I stood in the kitchen, arranging candles on a cake shaped like a robot. Evan's design had won first place in the state robotics championship the previous month, watching through the window as father and son tossed a football on the lawn. Their easy camaraderie still amazed me sometimes, the way they had forged a relationship that honored their lost years while building something new. "Need help?" Ethan appeared beside me, placing a gentle kiss on my cheek. "Just admiring the view," I replied. leaning into him slightly. We had taken things slowly, Ethan and I, mindful of the complex family dynamics we were navigating. But somewhere between movie nights and weekend brunches, between robotics competitions and quiet conversations on my private patio, we had built something solid and true. The diamond ring on my left hand, placed there just last week, caught the afternoon light. Hard to believe it's been a year, Ethan mused, following my gaze to where James was demonstrating a proper spiral throw. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like we've always been this way. The guest wing arrangement had evolved over time. What started as a practical solution to keep Evan's family together had become a comfortable balance of togetherness and privacy. James and I had developed a friendship built on mutual respect and our shared love for Evan. We were co-parents in the truest sense, each bringing different strengths to the challenging task of raising a teenager. My work at Meridian had flourished as well. The employee welfare department had expanded to include mentorship programs, family support services, and community outreach initiatives. We'd been featured in business magazines as a model for corporate culture transformation. Stephen Hale remained in Minneapolis, where rumor had it he was struggling to adapt to both the weather and his diminished importance. "Uncle Ethan!" Evan jogged up to us, slightly breathless. "Dad says you used to play quarterback in college. Is that true, or is he messing with me?" "Boston College, 3 years as starting QB," Ethan confirmed with mock modesty. "Then you have to show me how to throw properly. Dad's technique is ancient." James approached, feigning offense. "Ancient? I'll have you know that throw won my high school the regional championship." "In what year? 1985? Evan teased. 1991, thank you very much, James retorted, ruffling his son's hair. An affectionate gesture Evan pretended to hate but secretly loved. "Come on, Ethan. Show me how it's really done." Evan pulled Ethan toward the yard, leaving James and me alone in the kitchen. "Happy?" James asked, helping himself to a glass of water. "Very," I confirmed. "You?" "More than I thought possible." His expression grew thoughtful. "You know, the day Catherine took Evan and disappeared, I thought my life was over. The emptiness, I never imagined it could be filled again." "She would be proud of him," I said softly. "Yes, she would." James watched his son through the window. "She'd be grateful to you, too, for being there when neither of us could be." The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of Evan's friends from school and the robotics club. Soon the house was filled with teenage energy, boys demolishing pizza, girls clustered in conversation, music playing from expensive speakers James had installed at Evan's request. Later, after cake and presents, after Evan's friends had departed and the house had quieted, I found him sitting alone on the back porch, staring at something in his hands. "Birthday blues?" I asked, sitting beside him. "Nah, just thinking." He showed me what he was holding, the worn photograph of him and Catherine, now carefully preserved in a small frame. "I was just wondering what she'd think of all this. She'd be so proud of the young man you've become." "Yeah." He traced the edge of the frame. "Jessica, can I show you something?" "Of course." Evan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate silver locket. "Dad gave this to me today. It belonged to my mom." He opened the locket to reveal tiny photographs inside. Catherine on one side, and on the other, the complete version of the torn photograph I'd first seen a year ago, with James standing beside Catherine and young Evan. "It's beautiful, Evan. I want you to have it," he said, holding it out to me. "Oh, Evan, I couldn't. That's your mother's, and you're my family too." His eyes, so like James's, held absolute certainty. "Dad agrees. We talked about it." Tears pricked at my eyes as I accepted the precious gift. "I'll treasure it always." "Dad said Mom would have liked you," Evan continued. "That you have her same stubbornness." I laughed through my emotion. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." Evan stood, stretching. "I'm going to go try out that new game system. Want to watch?" "I'll be in soon." As Evan disappeared into the house, I opened the locket again, studying the complete family photograph. The missing piece, James, now restored to the image, just as he had been restored to Evan's life. Ethan found me still sitting there some minutes later. "Deep thoughts?" he asked, joining me. "Just reflecting on how life takes unexpected turns." I showed him the locket Evan had given me. "That's quite a gift," he said softly, understanding its significance. "A year ago, I was a project coordinator being bullied by my boss, suddenly responsible for a troubled teen who barely spoke to me. I shook my head in wonder. Now I'm a director with a fiancé, Co-parenting with the CEO in a mansion in Lake Forest. Life has a way of sorting itself out, Ethan mused. Not by itself, I corrected. Because people make choices. James chose to look for his son for years. I chose to open my home to a boy who needed one. Evan chose to give us all a chance, despite every reason not to trust again. From inside, we heard laughter. Evan and James probably engaged in competitive gaming. And I chose to finally ask you out after watching you from afar for months, Ethan added, taking my hand. After the most dramatic office party revelation in corporate history, I reminded him. There is that. He smiled. Ready to go in? In a minute. I looked at the house, lights glowing warmly in the twilight, the sounds of my unusual but perfect family filtering through open windows. I just want to enjoy this moment a little longer. Inside, James called my name. Jessica! Come settle this debate about pizza toppings before Evan disowns me for suggesting pineapple. Duty calls, I laughed, standing and pulling Ethan up with me. As we walked back toward the house, I thought about the photograph that started it all. A fragment of a broken family, missing crucial pieces. Like that photo, Evan had been torn from his complete story, carrying only pieces of his history. But sometimes torn things can be mended. Sometimes broken frames can be rebuilt, stronger than before, with new elements added to the original design. And sometimes, when life humiliates you in front of everyone, when it seems the world is laughing at your choices, the very thing they mock becomes your greatest victory. Because the day Stephen Hale tried to shame me for caring about some troubled foster kid wasn't the day my career derailed. It was the day a family began to heal. And nothing has ever felt more powerful than that.